On the agenda tonight, we're jumping into part 2 of the conversation with Steve Stevens from Billy Idol. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to part 2 of the set of 3 videos that I'm releasing on the channel with Steve Stevens. Tonight's video is focusing more on guitar technique, approach to playing, and Steve's advice to players in order to get their playing to the next level, things to focus on. So it's going to be a great one for you guitarists out there, but even if you're just a fan of guitar players, guitar solos, or just music in general, it's great to get the insight from somebody like Steve on a topic like this. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's jump straight into it. Just to kind of focus on the playing perspective, a lot of players and even recreational players might learn, a lot of licks and might learn a lot of scales and know a lot of shapes, but then they're at the point at just thinking, well, what do I do with this? How do I turn what I know into me playing the guitar? And yeah, that is because I've been teaching guitar for over 15 years. I know that from students that come to me, a lot of them do have a lot of knowledge of the fretboard and and the shapes, but then how to get that information onto their fretboard that isn't just them playing through the same lines that they've played through endlessly. So I'd love to get your input on that concept of, obviously not going through kind of scales and shapes, but the mental approach to playing, how you apply your knowledge into you expressing yourself through the instrument.
I think there's probably about three key elements. Always have, if you're going to solo, let's say, always have something when you look at the music and the section that you're going to solo on. Always have something that you put in your back pocket that you say can be memorable, and give the listener something they can hang on, and rather than out of the gate think, wow, I'm going to show them all this stuff I've practiced for 8 hours a day for the last 10 years, that there's a time and a place in the solo for that. But first you have to draw the listener in with something that they can remember. I learned a valuable lesson, which was when I toured in South America. South American fans are incredible, and what they do is, if they know the piece of music, when you go into a solo, they will sing the solo. And when I went into Rebel Yell, I'm going, what is that? And they're singing, it's like a football chant at that point. And I thought, well, that's really cool. That's something I will always remember, because no matter where you go, have something that the audience can participate in, a little bit of melody. And then veer off, and all of this other stuff that you've accumulated, and we all have our favorite licks and solo things and things technique-wise that, it's hard not to show that stuff because you've spent hours doing it. And it's like, but I almost look at it like a toolbox, like you open up the toolbox and you've got that, that's your spanner or something, and that's your ratchet, and that's your, and pull those things out after you've given people a little bit of air candy to hang on to. And then, maybe refer back to that melody again to remind them, and then build it dynamically, almost like you would. Imagine if you watched a movie and from beginning to end, it was a exciting car chase scene with blow-ups and smash-ups, and you'd become numb to it after a while. But the thing I always notice is after there's a high point, Jason Statham or something, the shit blows up, and the girl, and he saved her, and then followed by he looks in her eyes, and he saved her, and everything calms down in this moment. And that chase and action is so much more effective because it's followed by this calmness. So use dynamics, use emotional content. Give them something that's wow, really going to stun people, but then maybe follow it up by some long notes, some really emotional. the longer the note, the best you can show off your vibrato, because we all try and come up with our own unique vibrato. That's what separates Clapton from B.B. King, from Angus to, you can tell 3 notes. Usually us guitar players go, oh yeah, I know, that's slash. You can hear that vibrato anywhere. So, and the vibrato is like breathing, it's like a singer breathing, and it can be very emotional. You get that right vibrato, especially, Gary Moore, man, he could hang on 2 notes with that. Just where he put that swing, it's worth its weight in gold. So those are like 3 key things, I think, that make up a really good solo. And then rhythm, obviously. One of the cool things about the Top Gun solo is that at some point I go it, and I was not thinking of it, but when I go 5 against 4, it's your ear goes, wow, you cannot not listen to that, because it's breaking the rhythm, but it's joining at different points. It's obviously that's something that classical composers live and die by, those polyrhythmic things. So don't forget about rhythm. Don't forget about patterns, repeating patterns of 5s and 6s and things that are not going by the bar, because that's how you step out and get noticed. It's just a matter of putting those things together, and that's what practicing is for, because you start to, you jam at home and you go, okay, I'm going to do this and do, and you get used to it. You instinctively know where to interject these little ideas.
Yeah, I think it's another important thing to mention is that people who are kind of learning to play and practicing, whatever technique they may be practicing at that time, it's having the appreciation of putting in enough practice so that it becomes subconscious, so then you can apply the emotional, whatever you want to put in there expression wise. It's not, oh right, how did I do this when I did it before? It's already there, and then you decide how you want to apply it. So some people might get in that kind of slot of actually just not having the techniques down to the point that they actually need them,
That's right.
So that they can just kind of, because it is an instinctive thing. And when you're watching great players like yourself, you can tell that you're not thinking about the techniques you're playing. You're thinking about, it's almost like you're outside of the bubble looking at what you're doing and deciding where to go with it. But this is another thing about your kind of playing style. It's very much not one playing style. You've got lots of different things. Like you said, your toolbox that you jump into, and the amount of tools in that box that you've got at your disposal, it seems like there's endless places that you can go with it. But just to talk about your own playing style and your inspirations and these little avenues that you go down, because a lot of people will notice with your playing that you use your fingers a lot as well, and you've done a flamenco album, and there's that kind of inspiration in there. But just talk to me a little bit about kind of how you piece together your own sound and your influences that were added in to get that sound.
A lot of it is, and it's always changing, because my musical taste, and I think this goes with anyone, even if you're just a listener. As you get older, you start listening to things that maybe you didn't quite like. When I was, when I was just starting to tour, say with Billy Idol or whatever, 22 years old, it was all about, aggression, 180 BPM, and there was all these hot shot guitar players on the scene, and I was listening and, divulging that stuff. And I certainly, I listen to more classical now, maybe soundtracks and things that are different from that. I'm a different person now. My body cadence is different. I'm not going to be that guy. But I think one of the things that really impressed me, I started playing really, really young, and I was like, my dad brought home a guitar when I was 7.5, and that was just at about the time when the whole folk music thing was happening. Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, a lot of folk music. And I was living in New York. I have an older brother who's 5 years older who would go into the village, Greenwich Village, where all that stuff was happening. And I'd tag along, and there was a place called Folk City, which was like it was a music store, but also a live venue, very small, probably only held 50 people. And, you know, Bob Dylan would be there, and, you know, all these other folk players, lots of blues players who were getting recognition, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, Reverend Gary Davis, things like that. So folk was really happening. So I didn't even think of getting an electric guitar until I was 13 years old, because I was learning how to play all this folk stuff. And so that's my background, fingerstyle folk music, and as well it eventually developed into some classical, although I was never really a great reader, but I found a really good teacher. And I wanted to get into this high school of performing arts, the FAME school. I thought I would be totally lost in my local high school. I wasn't very good at football. It's too small. I would have got smashed. So I wanted to get into this music school, and he helped me learn these classical pieces because you had to audition. And I did get in there. So folk and classical had a real strong background. Then I get an electric guitar, and this was just around the time of the, 1971 or so, and man, whammo, I heard Steve Howe and Steve Hackett and Robert Fripp, and they were using all these influences. Up until that time, I hadn't heard a guy in a rock band, because even though they call it progressive rock, it's still a rock band. Wow, he's playing classical, Mood for a Day. Wow, I can use some of this stuff. And then as I started to learn more about what they were listening to jazz guys, and they were listening to Chet Atkins and country guys, and I thought, wow, those guys are such unique players. Robert Fripp doesn't sound like anyone else, or a lot of the progressive guys, or even the Canterbury scene, guys like Phil Miller, who people might not know, but he was in Hatfield in the North, and then I started getting into gong and all this kind of stuff. There was a lot of cool stuff coming. I was a real Anglophile. I didn't like that much American stuff, to be honest. I like Boston, but I wasn't really into a lot of the American pop stuff. Just seemed like product to me, whereas the English stuff, it seemed like the English labels were signing more experimental stuff, They weren't so concerned with these massive numbers. And, Yes didn't really get album sales until their third record, Genesis, same thing, So I latched onto this kind of stuff, and I found a way to kind of be inspired by those guitar players, but I've never wanted to sound like them. I don't sound anything like Steve Howe, but my approach to a song is not dissimilar, because I look at it as a piece to arrange. So even with something like Eyes Without a Face, okay, I'm going to play 12-string guitar on it because it's kind of a ballad idea there, and then we're going to go into a heavy rock riff thing. So I was never of the school of you plug in your guitar and you play, and the song runs for 4 minutes and you just have this one thing. There are some guys who are fantastic at that, Clapton or Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was more intrigued by the kind of process of being in the studio, which was kind of laboratory, that you could kind of, and I always, especially on Rebel Yell, I'd be picking the engineer's brain or bringing in something. How do we get that guitar sound? Where can we use it? Oh, great, let's bring it in the second verse. I wasn't even thinking, how am I going to recreate this stuff? It was just like, well, this is the studio is the canvas. So I think that's more been my approach and continues to be.
It's that overall appreciation of the music, and I think what you've mentioned about focusing on melody and it being such an important part, and to a certain extent, hooks. effectively throwing hooks in there. That I know that a lot of people probably attribute hooks to something, vocal or something that they hear in a song, but the importance of using hooks in your solos and sometimes in your rhythm as well, with a little fill that you might just throw in that you
Absolutely.
go back and revisit. So yeah, really important thing. I mean, what are your views on that, speed versus melody? And I think personally, from what I see on Instagram and YouTube, there are a lot of younger guitar players now who are just seeing how fast they can get. And there's always going to be a ceiling to that, because the person who plays fastest doesn't win. They don't win guitar. So, getting that approach of balancing, how would you tell people to approach that within their solos?
It's only really effective when it's surrounded by something contrasting. So I think that having that speed, one of the more modern guitar players that I really admire is Guthrie Govan, and he has incredible technique and speed. But I think the first thing that I heard from him is a song called Fives, right? And it's a beautiful melody, and then he goes into this middle section of these hammer-ons at this blinding speed, and it's so effective, and it's so composed and so thought out. Whereas if he had started out of the gate with the speed, after however many bars or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, that's great, but okay. So use contrasting ideas surrounded by it, and allow the speed and the technique to be the high point, because that's your most, that's when you're going to dig in, and that's when you're going to really show, all of you're laying it all out. You're showing them all, your guns ablazing, that's it. And then maybe, follow it up with something, concentrate on, as I mentioned, vibrato, melody, establish a melody in your solo that you can always refer back to. Because at some point, I don't know about other players, but for me, if I've got 32 bars to solo over, there's going to come a time when I'm going, what do I do now? Okay, I've and you don't want to shoot your load and just be like, so have that melody maybe before you listen to the track and go, okay, this is going to be my melody that I can always refer back to. And that gives you, and you know it, and you can play it, and it's easy, and it gives you time in your mind to go, what am I going to do next? Oh, I'm going to do this. Whereas if you're blinding all the time, my brain doesn't work that quickly. I don't know whose does, but so have a bit of a melody that you can refer back to.
I think it's that combination of what I call conscious versus unconscious playing, or subconscious playing, but I know that you can describe overall techniques and playing as being subconscious when you kind of get into it and use your expression. But having that conscious, like you say, melody that you're putting into it, and then it's great to have, everybody has their subconscious lines that you can throw together. It might be 15 notes, it might be 20 notes, it might be a little run that you do up and down the fretboard, and that is kind of a stock kind of subconscious run that will always happen the same way every time. But it's kind of dipping into consciousness regularly.
And keep compiling your vocabulary. It's almost like a address book or something. Keep adding things to it. One of my favorite guitar players, Alan Holsworth. Now, Alan had set scales and set patterns mathematically worked out. And he didn't just listen to a solo and go, oh, I'm going to wing it. He had these things at his disposal, and he could draw upon this vast address book of things. Oh, well, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to play this scale, and then I'm going to go down here and do my whammy thing. And, so that's really it. And that only comes with practice and putting in the hours and locking those things away and kind of realizing, we all know as players the things that we like. We stumble upon them, or we see somebody on YouTube and we go, oh, I want to learn that. Okay, so you store that away and you go, oh, I'm going to use that in something someday. And you keep compiling these things that you can use. And that's just from experience and hours.
So I'm just going to jump in here. As you guys probably already know, this is part 2 of the 3 videos that I'm going to be releasing with Steve on the channel. Make sure that you are subscribed and hit that notification bell to get notified for part 3. But thank you for watching this one. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!